It's great to be in the SEC. Thank you for listening to the SEC Recap Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Warren. If you love all things SEC, the SEC Recap is where you want to be. You can follow us on Twitter at SEC Recap. If you like the show and you'd want to support the show, you can check out our Patreon, patreon.com/SEC_recap, or our podcast homepage, anchor.fm/SEC Recap. This is our Game of the Week episode, Florida at Tennessee. Number 20 Florida at number 11 Tennessee. Remember, you can check out the accompanying article for this podcast. The link is in the show notes. That'll be to our Medium page. The number 20 Florida Gators make their first road trip of the season to what is going to be a rowdy Neyland Stadium in Knoxville, Tennessee, to take on the number 11 Tennessee Volunteers, my Tennessee Volunteers, for a 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff. Vols currently a 10.5 point favorite. Under first-year head coach Billy Napier, Gators are 2-1 on the season with a conference loss at home to Kentucky in Week 2 and having just survived a close one hosting USF in Week 3. Ooh, they barely got out of that one. Gators have played all 3 games so far in the Swamp and will face a challenging road environment in Knoxville. 3-0 Volunteers will make a stand on their home field under second-year head coach Josh Heupel, who has revitalized Tennessee football after several years of disappointing seasons for Vols fans. The Gators have won 16 of the last 17 matchups with the Vols, a fact that longtime Vols fans are all too aware of. Despite Tennessee's red-hot offense and Florida looking down compared to previous years, I know Vols fans are nervous that the old swamp bug could bite once again. Tennessee's most recent win in this matchup came in 2016. Prior to that, 2004. And during this long stretch, Tennessee has occasionally fielded rosters with superior talent and had many conceivable advantages in several aspects of the game. Yet, Florida still managed to come up on top to the dismay of fans and players alike. The Gators have indeed enjoyed complete ownership of this rivalry to the point where I think many in the Gators camp no longer even consider it so. The Tennessee-Florida game used to decide the SEC East, but more recently it has barely decided who will be second, third, or even fourth in the East. So how much does this game still matter to fans? Well, the answer is a lot. Napier and Heupel have never met on the field as head coaches. Their only contest on record is the 2014 Sugar Bowl, where Heupel was co-offensive coordinator for Oklahoma and Napier was Alabama's wide receivers coach. Oklahoma beat Alabama in that matchup 45-31. Napier and Heupel step into this game with no personal connection to the history of the Tennessee-Florida rivalry, and for them, as well as most of the players, it's probably just the beginning of many contests between the two coaches. But fans remember, and many of the Tennessee faithful are looking for victory to end the Gator plague in Knoxville and a new dynasty to begin this weekend on Rocky Top. Let's look at some stats. On offense, Florida, the number 98 offense in the country in terms of total offense. So Gators average 25.3 points per game, 353 yards a game. That's about six or so yards a play. They're averaging 58 plays a game and 26 minutes in time of possession. Their passing offense is gaining 141 yards a game, 0 touchdowns. That's 0 overall passing touchdowns through the season. In the run game, they're gaining 212 yards a game, averaging 2.7 touchdowns a game for 8 overall rushing touchdowns on the year. The Florida offense also has 4 interceptions, and they fumbled 3 times, lost 1 of them. let's turn to the Tennessee side. Number 3 overall in the country in terms of total offense. Vols are averaging 52 points a game, 553 yards, 7.13 yards a play, 77 plays a game, and 25 minutes in time of possession. Their passing offense is putting up 363 yards a game, 2.7 touchdowns a game, 8 overall passing touchdowns on the year. And in the run game, 182 yards a game, 4 touchdowns, 12 overall rushing touchdowns on the season. Best part, 0 interceptions. Both Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton taking really good care of the ball. Fumble game, however, they have fumbled 6 and lost 3. But on the offensive side of the ball, I'm giving the clear-cut advantage to Tennessee. Let's flip on over to the defense. Florida, number 77 overall in the country in terms of total defense. Gators average 26.7 points allowed, 373.3 yards a game they're giving up. Their passing defense, allowing 178 yards a game, 0.7 touchdowns a game. That means they've given up 2 overall passing touchdowns on the season. And their run defense is allowing 195.3 yards a game, 2 touchdowns a game, 6 overall rushing touchdowns allowed for the Gators defense. Gators defense has 4 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, 1 recovered fumble. Over on Tennessee side, number 54 in the country, so sitting approximately 23 spots ahead of the Gators in terms of total defense. Vols average 14.3 points allowed and 344 yards per game. Now, Florida has played Kentucky and opened the season with Utah. Tennessee has played Ball State and Pitt, followed by Akron. So they've got one, what I would consider real quality opponent sandwiched in between 2 very inferior opponents. So these numbers skew a little bit defensively in Tennessee's favor for that reason. So the Vols are allowing 14.3 points on average per game and 344 yards a game. Their passing defense is allowing 263.1, 1 touchdown. They've given up 3 passing touchdowns through 3 games. Their run defense is allowing 83.3 yards, 0.3 touchdowns, just 1 overall. So Vols defense only allowed 1 rushing touchdown through 3 games. Vols defense has also picked up 3 interceptions. They forced 3 fumbles and recovered 2. However, because of the way that the opponent matchups skew in favor of Tennessee, I'm calling the advantage neutral. I think Tennessee probably is a little bit better defense. After all, we'll find out this Saturday. But because of who they played and who Florida has played, I'm calling that one neutral between both squads. So what can we take away from this? I think most notably the time of possession battle is going to have to skew one way or the other, and Florida really needs it to go their way. They're only running 58 plays a game, and when you have the ball just 26 minutes, they're playing slower and turning the ball over, i.e. they're not capitalizing on their possessions. When Tennessee plays as fast as they do, they already run 20 more plays a game on average than Florida. And we know this Vols offense is capable of getting downfield in just 5 or 6 plays. So if Florida plays slow, yet allows Tennessee to control the time of possession, they're just not going to have very many opportunities to put points on the board. Gators need to take better care of the ball, and they need to maximize the fewer possessions they're going to have in this matchup. My other takeaway, Florida is just not effective through the passing game. The stats speak for themselves. They have 0 passing touchdowns on the season. So if I'm Tennessee, this makes my defensive plan pretty clear. You keep the passing game ineffective, and then you contain their run game. Their tailbacks are pretty good. That's clearly where Florida has an advantage. That's clearly what they're going to want to do. They'll want to run Anthony Richardson if they can. When you keep him in the pocket, as Kentucky showed, he's not good. He can't pass, and they don't have big play receivers to pick up those big chunk plays. So if you're Tennessee, you keep Anthony Richardson in the pocket, you keep their pass game ineffective, and you maintain run lane integrity, and you try to control that aspect of their game. For Florida, they're going to have to worry about Tennessee's tempo offense and the stress that the spacing is going to place on their defense. Gators are going to want to keep pressure on Hendon Hooker and limit what has really been a lackluster Vols run game, especially as we get into the key injuries, which we'll take a look at here. On the Tennessee side, Cedric Tillman went down last week. We don't really know his status. They're going to keep that close to the vest. We probably won't know until game day if Cedric Tillman will even suit up and appear in this ball game. We also saw Jabari Small go down on his second carry of the game. Looked like a little shoulder injury, although we saw him later in the game kind of laughing and cutting up with some of the trainers. So think Jabari Small will be okay. We also saw Dylan Sampson take a ding. He kind of rolled out near the sideline. Don't know what his status is, but those are two scholarship running backs that you could potentially be missing. If so, that's going to place a lot of this game on one young man's shoulders we'll look at in the next segment. For Florida, key injuries. We know Ventrell Miller is most likely going to be out. He's one of their best linebackers. Michael Tarquin, their starting right tackle, so they will likely have somebody in there playing for him. I don't know his status. By the time you're listening to this podcast, we could know injury updates for all of these players. And then I hesitate to even mention this one, but there have been whispers, nothing confirmed at all, of Anthony Richardson not being 100%. So I'm putting that on my watch list because there is no depth at quarterback behind Anthony Richardson on this Florida team. So if these are key injuries to watch, if these players cannot go, or assuming they can go, I think here's the key players that are going to make the difference in this ball game. For Tennessee, that's going to be quarterback Hendon Hooker. He has 0 interceptions on the year. He takes really good care of the football, and he'll need to do so against the Gators defense that I think will be looking to disrupt Tennessee's up-tempo rhythm. Now, how will they do that? That remains to be seen. But if they can get Tennessee out of that rhythm in any way, we've seen that kind of start Tennessee slow early in ball games this season. They haven't really come out firing on all cylinders. And if Florida can kind of swing some momentum their way early in this game, I think that'll be key to taking some of the wind out of that crowd at Neyland Stadium. I also have running back Jalen Wright. This is the guy that I think could have a big game if Small can't go and Sampson is still questionable. Again, I think Small is going to suit up for this game. I think Sampson will be okay for this game. But if they're not, for whatever reason, Wright will be leaned on heavily, and he'll need a big game. The Vols will need a big game from Jalen Wright. And then I'm going over on the defensive side. Linebacker Aaron Beasley. Kentucky showed that if you can put someone out there that can spy Anthony Richardson and contain his run threat, Richardson isn't strong enough in the pocket to beat you through the air. So I think that's where Aaron Beasley could play a big role in the game this Saturday. For Florida, no surprise here, quarterback Anthony Richardson. Richardson's play, it's been on a steady decline since week 1. Not sure if it's physical or mental. But if he's at 100% and playing confidently, watch out. He hasn't been good through the air, but every defensive coordinator knows what he's capable of. Running backs Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne. Both of these guys have proven to be really effective, capable backs, and have notched a couple touchdowns each on the season. If Florida's passing game isn't going to be that good, they're going to have to lean on that run game, maybe with a little bit of Anthony Richardson mixed in there. Watch out for these two guys, especially in and around the red zone. I think they're going to lean on their running backs in this matchup. They don't have big-time wide receivers, but one guy they do have, Xavier Henderson. There's not a lot of production from this receiver squad, but Henderson has absorbed twice as many catches as the next closest receiver, Ricky Pearsall. Now, Pearsall, I think, is the yardage leader, but Xavier is sort of the target monster. So he could be a quick release valve on some underneath stuff. It's really easy to hit Tennessee on a lot of plays over the middle and underneath. So I would look for them to maybe utilize that part of their game from Xavier Henderson. And then on the defensive side of the ball for Florida, safety Trey Dean. He led the defense last year against Tennessee. I think they're going to need him to do it again if they really want to have a hope of staying in this matchup. Thus, in the immortal words of Alanis Morissette, what it all comes down to: Tennessee's offensive tempo versus Florida's defensive depth. Florida's starting defense is very capable, but behind the starters, there are concerns about quality players versus the speed at which Tennessee's offense runs. We've seen a lot of defenses try to control up-tempo offenses by faking injuries so they can get substitutions in. But if you're substituting weaker players, a good offense is still going to move the ball on you, and I think that's what's going to happen here. Quarterback depth. UT's Joe Milton has looked really good. He's looked excellent in his snaps, and nothing about this offense would change if Joe Milton has to come in. And not a lot of teams can say that. If your starting quarterback goes down and your backup comes in, you see a lot of teams start to lean on the tailback, especially if you have a good tailback. If Joe Milton comes in, nothing about Tennessee's game plan or play calling or offensive scheme changes. And that's to Tennessee's advantage. Florida has no QB depth behind Anthony Richardson. And if there's whispers, like I said, of Richardson not being fully healthy, I think they'll really try to limit what he does through the run game so that they can protect him as much as possible. Jack Miller, the number 2, is still TBD on the thumb injury. And he had the same thumb injury and surgery that Drew Brees had 2 or 3 years ago for the Saints when Brees had to miss 7 or 8 games. So they'll say Jack Miller is to be determined week to week, but a quarterback with a thumb injury, you're not playing until you're fully healthy. So behind Anthony Richardson, it's just Anthony Richardson. And lastly, I think it comes down to fourth downs. The Gators are 3 of 5 for 60% on fourth down conversions on the season. The Vols are 8 of 9 for 80%. If you've watched any of these games in the past years, you've seen games come down to field goals, Hail Marys. I would not be surprised at a pivotal fourth down at some point in this game, and I like the odds for the Vols to pick one up. Home field advantage. Neyland is huge. It's loud. It's going to be checkered, and Vols fans are hungry. So let's check out the odds. ESPN's FPI has Tennessee favored at an 87.4% chance to win versus Florida at a 12.6% chance to win. The spread favors Tennessee as 10.5-point favorites, and I believe Tennessee is going to cover the 10.5. I do. The over-under sits at 62 at the time of this writing or recording, with team totals for Tennessee at 37.6 and Florida at 25.1. Now, only twice in the last 10 years has the total gone above 62. One of those times was 2016, which is the last time the Vols won, and in 2018. So, I've seen most people picking Tennessee in this matchup, and when you look at the matchup history, again, Florida has won 16 of the last 17. That scares me a little bit. But when you look at the matchup on paper, Tennessee's advantages are clear. I believe that Tennessee can run their offense better than Florida can run theirs, and that they can do it with a sold-out home crowd cheering them on. In an early week press conference about the road game to Tennessee, head coach Billy Napier said, quote, "It's not like we're going to Canada and they're going to change the rules. It's going to be the same game. It's going to be a little louder and played at a different location." Around the same time, in another press conference, Josh Heupel said in response to the Florida-Tennessee game, This is one of the ball games that this fan base and our players point to. Obviously, being a fan of college football, I've seen the great games and the rivalry itself play out. That's why you come here. You want to be a part of these types of games. Folks, ladies and gentlemen, people listening at home, I don't think Billy Napier gets it yet. Josh Heupel gets it. Final prediction, Tennessee 37, Florida 24. Vols win. Vols squash the swamp bug. Vols start a new dynasty this weekend on Rocky Top. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this content, give us a follow on Twitter at SEC Recap. Follow us, like, comment, share, subscribe to the podcast. Get notified for new episodes each week. Again, I'd love your support for the show. Anchor.fm/SEC Recap, or check out our Patreon. Those links are in the show description. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. And it's great to be in the SEC right here on the SEC Recap.